climate change, but they come increasingly from organizations that have no particular vested interest in trying to get politicians to respond more purposefully. Just 10 days ago, the International Energy Agency published its World Energy Outlook, a document that I invite you all to have a look at if you want to understand just how urgent it now is that we address the problem of accelerating climate change. In that document, the IEA's chief economist, a man called Fatih Birol, reminded politicians that at the moment they are doing two completely contradictory things. On the one hand, they are committing their nations to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases by given percentages over a given period of time. And on the other hand, as if that wasn't going on over here, they are continuing to encourage investment in fossil fuel generating capacity as if there was no problem with climate change. This cognitive dissonance, as the report refers to it, has now got us into a very big mess. And the IEA is now officially warning politicians that unless we resolve this contradictoriness at the heart of energy policy, we will have no more than 5 years left to us before we trip over that threshold about runaway climate change. At the same time, the data keeps coming in all the time about what is happening out there in the world today. I had the extraordinary privilege of listening recently to Vice President Al Gore, known of course for his extremely enthusiastic advocacy of low-carbon technologies and different routes to creating prosperity in the world. He said, if you've only got time to focus on one set of data in the world today, focus on the data that we can now look at for 2011. Don't do all that historical stuff. Don't do all the modeling about what's going to happen to the climate over the next 20 to 30 years. Just look at what is happening right now over the last 6 months. And he then produced a rolling set of information about extreme weather conditions, extreme events, which, to be honest, would have made anybody sit up in horror at the consequences of what that means. In the first 6 months of 2011, 387 million people already seriously affected by drought. In the first 6 months of 2011, 12 countries experiencing the worst ever flooding in their history. In the first 7 months of 2011, 225 US cities registering their hottest ever temperatures, And the list went on and on and on, a 1 6-month period. There are some people who argue that climate change is tomorrow's problem, something that future generations will need to deal with. We need to understand that climate change is materializing in our lives and affecting the lives of hundreds of millions of people right now, today, every single day of the year. Add to that, of course, all the pressure on commodities, on energy prices, on water, on soil, on biodiversity, and you can see why some people describe this as today's perfect storm when it comes to sustainability. Now, where will all this be felt most pressingly and most urgently? Well, if you listen to the scientists today, they will tell you unhesitatingly that this will be felt most painfully as it impacts on our ability to produce food. All of those converging pressures will impact most on our ability to produce food, to produce enough food, not just for 7 billion people today, but for 9 billion people tomorrow. To produce enough food for 9 billion people in ways that do not draw down on our natural capital, as we've been able to do over the last 40 to 50 years, as we've heard. There is no more credit left in the bank of planet Earth. We have to produce enough food for 9 billion people without drawing down on our natural capital at a time of accelerating climate change, confronting massive disruptions in the hydrological cycle on which modern farming depends. We have to do that. If we're going to be able to feed people, that's what we have to do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I always find myself smiling somewhat wryly when I hear people in the palm oil industry complaining of what I can only describe as palm oil exceptionalism. That feeling of palm oil being singled out for special attention by wayward NGOs and misguided academics and media people because they've got it in for the palm oil industry. I'm not sure we didn't get a little snippet of that from the minister a few minutes ago. I'm fascinated at this notion of palm oil exceptionalism, of palm oil being singled out for special attention in a way that no other commodity crop is singled out, no other vegetable oil is singled out, that it's something that this industry uniquely has to put up with. And as it happens, I think there's quite a lot of truth in that. There is something special going on as regards palm oil. And every single day, every single palm oil business should thank its lucky stars that it has been singled out in that way, been given a chance to move first in ways that it can choose for itself, to get its act in order before it is compelled to get its act in order by a set of higher pressures, to work out what sustainable production and consumption means in practice, to adopt new business models that are fit for purpose against that kind of backdrop. Every single day, everybody in this industry should thank their lucky stars that the palm oil industry is being singled out. Because the challenges that the palm oil industry faces today awaits every single land-based industry in the not too distant future. No industry, no part of agriculture and land use today is immune from the pressures that I have just outlined. Everybody will have to find a way of accommodating to that physical reality. The chance is for this industry to find out what that really means in practice, and not just on environmental issues. As Mr. Chandran said in his opening comments, sustainable palm oil means palm oil that is produced in an equitable, healthy, and just way. And there is no doubt that many of the most vexatious problems that still have to be addressed lie in this area. So let me change the tone a little bit. I don't want to get anybody too depressed. It seems to me that up against that set of adverse conditions, the palm oil industry has now a phenomenal advantage in being able to work with some of the very positive trends that are now coming forward to combat those negative trends. I'm only going to talk about two of those, and I want to talk about them in the context of competitiveness. Can I go to a more authoritative source on this than Charles Darwin himself, who in 1859 in The Origin of Species wrote as follows: "In the struggle for survival, the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals because they succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment." They succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment. That is not what many business leaders mean by competitiveness today, because what they normally mean is beating the hell out of their competitors in order to gain increased market share, or whatever else it might be. That is not what Charles Darwin said. Charles Darwin said that success lies in adaptability. And I would put it to you that this industry's future competitiveness lies in its adaptability, its ability to respond to these pressures in a way that will secure its future growth as no other industry can look to. Two positive trends, very quickly. Firstly, the extraordinary continuing growth in the knowledge base. The state of science today is extraordinary. Every day we know more than we did the day before, and tomorrow we'll know more than we did today. We have an equivalent of Moore's law going on in terms of our ability to use this science to help resolve these problems. Take the food security challenge that I talked about before. In that historical perspective, the first agricultural revolution was all about bringing more land into production and ensuring that we kept many, many more people alive simply by using more land. The second agricultural revolution, which came after the Second World War, from the late 1960s onwards, the so-called Green Revolution, didn't depend on more land, but depended on making better use of that land in terms of crop selection, selective breeding, and of course, the input of artificial fertilizers and chemicals. The third agricultural revolution, and that's the one we're in the middle of right now, in case that isn't clear, the third agricultural revolution can depend on neither of those two things. There is no huge land bank to bring into new production today, and it is impossible to go on using artificial inputs into agriculture in the way that we've done. The science that underpins this third agricultural revolution is very different indeed. It's about increased yields through better management and agronomy. It's about the transfer of skills and knowledge to enable low productivity growers and farmers to raise their game dramatically. It's about maximizing efficiency, making the best possible use of degraded land. It's about reducing and, where possible, eliminating all the waste at each different point in